So here we are ready to thread our rigid heddle so that we can create this pattern. And this is a 7 pattern thread pattern. So if you look at the patterns for the Baltic straps, only the pattern threads are pictured. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the border threads and are not pictured because those aren't the ones that you'll need to pick up. So only the, if you're looking at a pattern, only the pattern threads are described. And you can notice that there's little dots on the pattern. That refers to the thread that's raised up that you can see on the top row when the heddle is raised or lowered. So whichever thread is supposed to be up at that point, that is the dot. So they alternate because the heddle goes up and down as you weave, creating a different shed, and that's what makes the weaving. So it goes up and down like that. So you're basically weaving in and out, up and down. So each time you start a different row, either left or right, the heddle is going to go up or down, and so the pattern threads will change and shift. The heddle has the holes, and those threads will stay in place, and then the other ones in the long slots will slide up and down as the heddle moves either up or down. And you'll see that once we start threading. So after we've got our pattern set and our colors that we want to use, our yarn, I'm going to use a cotton and a linen yarn. The linen's really nice and strong, so it's good for both the warp and the weft. So I'm going to use this for the weft, and the pattern threads are going to be this cotton, and I'm going to double them so that they actually stand up a little bit thicker, and you can see the pattern more prominently. So even though it says 1 pattern thread here, I'm actually going to thread 2 and make it as if it was just 1. And so we have to decide what our border is. After we've got our pattern, we're going to decide how long to make our strap. So this loom here, you could make a strap really as long as you want. So with this heddle, we can create a band that has 7 pattern threads, and those go in the middle, and then the border threads go on the outside, and we can make up to 6 border threads. So you don't have to have that many border threads. You could have 3, you could have 4, you could have 5. But I'll show you how to do it so that there's 6 border threads and then the 7 pattern threads with the alternating background threads, because you need background threads in addition to the pattern threads, so that not only do they lay one on top of each other and then you kind of cinch them in, and that makes it stronger, but it also allows you to have these background this background color. So when you're setting up your yarn to weave, we're going to decide how long we want our band to be. And you can make it, really short. You can make it like a, bracelet or a choker band. But as you can see, you can't just make it as long as you want it to be, there has to be some extra so that you can not only wrap it around the loom, but also so that you can get the proper tension. So in addition to the length that you would, the finished length that you want it to be, you need to account for a few different types of thread loss. So the first one is the loom loss. So however much it takes to knot the end and stick it in the loom and then wrap it around and then also have some down here, that's about 24 inches. So you definitely have to, depending on the loom that you're using, if you're just using a backstrap loom and you're going to tie a knot and you don't have to have all this extra wrapping and down there, then you might have less, but I would bank on probably at least 24 inches of excess loom loss. So you definitely have to add that to the length that you want to make it ultimately. And then there's a couple of inches, probably one, depending on how long your strap actually is. The longer it is, the more you're going to lose just from the weaving. So when the weft goes across and it tightens up the warp, then it's not going to be straight like this. It's actually going to kind of go zigzaggy up and down. And so you're going to lose a little bit of length just from that weaving. So that's another probably 1 to 2 inches that you'll want to add, again, depending on how long your band is. And then the third type of loss is just the fiber shrinkage. So if you're making this out of cotton and linen, chances are the yarn hasn't been washed and pre-shrunk. So if you're going to be washing your band, if it's a headband or something that you want to be precise, like a belt that clasps, then you'll want to make sure you account for the shrinkage that's going to happen when you wash it. And in that case, again, it depends. Cotton, if it's mercerized, it probably won't shrink that much. But if it's just raw, then it might shrink, like at least an inch, again, depending on the length of band. So you want to account for all of that type of thread loss. And I would add at least 28 inches to be safe to any size band. The longer the band, probably a couple more inches you'll want to add, again, in the type of loom that you're using. So if I want my ultimate band to end up about, let's say, 24 or 28 inches, then I'm going to basically double that length. So I'll do about this long for each of the threads that I'm going to cut. And I'm going to cut in a specific pattern. And everybody has their own way of measuring their threads and laying them out and making sure that they either don't get tangled or that they stay in the proper order. So you can watch how I do it, and then if you like doing it another way or if it's easier, then by all means do it, the way that seems best for you. But that being said, I like to have my threads. I like to keep my space clean and free of anything that I don't need. And that way I can measure and cut and place the threads in a orderly fashion. So on our chart here, I'll just show you how you're going to be kind of laying them out, cutting them, and then threading them through the heddle. So if this is our pattern, we've got, again, 7 red threads, but that's actually going to be doubled. So we need 14 of those red pattern threads. And this heddle will actually hold 31 threads. Of course, some of them will be doubled, but 31 slots. So that's how I came up with the 7 pattern threads plus the background threads and then the 6 border threads. So let's just do a little diagram here. We'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Oh, almost. Okay. So we're going to have, I'll get my little red pen out here. We're going to have the border threads, and of course they alternate. So when you are, these are the heddles and the slots. So we're alternating, right? Slot, hole, slot, hole. So if we have 6 border threads, we're going to do, and we'll just do this so that it seems you can see it better. We're going to do border thread. We'll do 2 whites, white and white, because they're alternating, right? One's going to be up and then the other one's going to be down. So then we'll do 2 more. We'll do them in red because I want to have this stripe. So we want to have 2 so that as they go up and down, they stay red and it doesn't make sort of like a polka dot pattern. Whereas if there was only 1 thread here with red and 1 with white, then there would be kind of like a funny polka dot pattern. So we're going to do red and red. And then because we're doing 6 border threads, we'll do a white and a white. And then I skipped these blank spaces because that just makes it easier to see what is the slot and which one is the hole. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're going to do our pattern threads. So because we ended with white, we're going to start that pattern thread, and this will be doubled, and then we'll do 2 whites, and then you'll see that the next pattern thread is going to be down a step. So you're going to have a pattern thread in a slot, and then the next 2 whites, and then a pattern thread in a hole here. So don't be alarmed if it doesn't kind of line up like that. And then we'll do 2 whites alternating, and then another pattern thread. So we've got 3 pattern threads, border threads, 6 border threads with the alternating whites in between. And then because it's a 7 pattern, we'll do white, white, and then this is going to be our middle. So sometimes the middle threads are a different color. Sometimes you might want to make it extra thick. Who knows? But that's the middle thread. And then we'll do white and white. So you can see how, if you wanted to chart it out to make it easier to kind of get your head around the warping, this is how you would do it. So then we're going to do 2 more whites and 1 more pattern thread to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the border will be just the same as this border. So pattern, border, pattern, border. White, white, red, red. Of course, you could do a different color border. You could do blue, you could do green, you could do whichever one you want. And that's how we're going to thread them through the heddle. So first we're going to cut. You can also see that it will guide you as to how many and which threads to cut. So we're going to cut 2 whites, then we'll cut 2 reds, then we'll cut 2 whites, then we'll cut 2 reds for this pattern thread, 2 whites, 2 more reds, 2 whites, 2 more reds, and we'll lay them out so that it's easy to then go and thread them through our heddle and keep it all organized. So there's all my border threads, and then the next one I'm going to do is pattern thread. So I'll measure it, but I'm going to separate it so that I know, just to keep track of everything that I've done. So I'm going to keep my border threads separate over there. And again, I'm going to cut 2 reds for the pattern. You could also use a thicker yarn if you wanted to, and then you wouldn't have to cut 2. And then to avoid it getting too many threads in one bundle, I'm going to actually make a new bundle for the next pattern section. So just double check I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's up to there. And then I'm going to measure this one out. That's going to be my measuring. This is my middle. Set that aside.
So now we are going to take those threads and put them in the heddle according to this pattern.
So let's start with our border. I'm gonna grab 2 whites. One goes in the slot and one goes in the hole. And I just pull it through. And you want to make sure that they're kind of even. So what I do is weight them down with something as I go. And we will, work on all this excess after we thread them all. So don't worry too much if it's getting a little tangled down here. I'm going to do our 2 reds. I'm just going to bunch them together. I've got our last 2. Okay, so now we're going to start our pattern,
which means that we're going to be
doubling the pattern thread. So instead of putting just one thread through, we're actually going to do 2 reds at the same time through this little dot. And with thicker yarns, you might need a needle threader or it's like a little loop that you put the yarn through, and then with a little needle pointer at the end, just to make it easier to thread. So that's the first pattern thread. Then we alternate the whites. One there and one there. And there they are, all threaded through, up, down, up, down. So before we put them on our loom, we have to tie these ends in a knot. Then we can kind of untangle as we go, and we'll warp it, or we'll adjust the tension on our loom. Make sure they're all in, and then a little knot, just like that. So the next step is to put the heddle and all the threads onto our loom. So this knot will help keep the tension. So it's designed to make sure that it's nice and sturdy. And then I just loop it around like that. You might have to adjust kind of that way that it goes. And you'll see that they'll kind of even out as it gets tighter, all the threads. And you just keep winding very neatly and tightly so that there's no loose guys. And if it starts to tangle, what you can do is place it on the loom like this. And then that pressure is designed to kind of pull that tension. And if you need to kind of organize your threads, see where we're at. So right now, this is still too long to put through here. So we'll do one more loop and see how that goes. But in the meantime, make sure this is nice and tight. And we could take it off. And this is also how you adjust the length as you weave too. We'll just do this in the opposite way. Okay, and I'll put it back on. If it gets kind of tangled, what we can do is we'll just use our fingers to kind of untangle it. The longer it is, the more you'll just have to keep doing this, and it'll untangle as it goes. be able to do one more loop around before we put them down into the slot. So these are adjustable, so you can open it up and put the threads down in there. So we'll go one more time. One more time around. And with this type of loom, you just want to make sure that you're wrapping it so that the yarns are at the top, coming from the back and around. Because if you were doing it upside down like this, then that's not going to be proper tension. You won't be able to get the shed open, and it'll be a nightmare. So you just want to make sure that your threads are coming up and over the top like that. Okay, just that tension, and then we can kind of put these excess threads down through here. Undo that, and then you kind of stuff them in. If this is awkward, you could take this whole thing off, but I feel like it's a little bit more tedious to do it like that. And then you kind of grab them from underneath. Make sure you got them all. And then, of course, even them out. If any of them are twisted, we can adjust it. So we don't want anything sagging here, so we're going to tighten it until it's nice and taut. There we go. So that they should all be in basically one layer down here. Nice and tight. Move that back and forth. And then, as you're pulling on this, you want to tighten these. Make sure it's in the middle so your heddle's not going and bumping up against the edge. And this just hangs down, and as we take this and lengthen it, this will just get longer and this will get shorter. So now we've got our heddle, our threads are all warped correctly, and now we're going to wrap our yarn around our shuttle, and then we'll get to weaving. You can always add more
Weft as you go,
so don't worry about loading it up like too much, so much that it's hard to pass through.